Okay, my name is Charlene Danas. I'm the Associate Director of Education and Inclusivity at the Center for the Physics of Living Cells, which is in our physics department here. And I will pass it along and we'll introduce ourselves.
Hello everyone, my name is Dominique Arnold and I am the University Laboratory High School Librarian, and I also have a position in the Educational Psychology Department teaching intergroup dialogue classes.
Hi everyone, my name is Joe Bradley. I'm assistant professor over in bioengineering and also a lecturer in the Geese College of Business.
Okay, so I'm going to start and then pass it to Joe and finally to Dominique. And I'm going to clip this somehow like that. Okay, great. So we're going to be talking about IRise, toward developing a model of respectful community engagement and transforming the culture of STEM. So this is our team. We have the team has changed over time, let's put it that way. But we typically have these categories of people. So we always need to have faculty buy-in. It's really important for what we do to have the university professors really participate and buy into this process. So we have our College of Engineering faculty. Joe is one of our faculty. Ella Vertecken is another one, and she's not here today. We always have engaged public school teachers in the work that we do and really as equal partners in the work that we do. Dominique is kind of wearing two hats, actually. She doesn't fit totally. She kind of fits in a couple of different categories, honestly, because she is a teacher, but she's also working at the university, so she's kind of in the staff role as well. But Lindsay Aikman is a high school teacher that we've worked with. And then there are graduate students. We always have graduate students who serve as teaching assistants, more or less, in the course that we teach. And they're typically, again, from the College of Engineering, although this year we had one student who we brought over from anthropology, and that was really a great partnership. And then staff, people like me, who administer programs, are involved in outreach as part of our profession, basically. So those are the categories of people that we have that make this partnership work. These are the names. And let me just explain to you what IRise is. So it stands for Illinois Partnership for Respecting the Identities of Students in Engineering. That actually changed. It used to be something else, Illinois Partnership for Research or something or other, I don't know. But anyway, I'll tell you the history of the program and how we kind of came to where we are now. So this program started several years ago, I think 10 years ago almost, or 9 years ago. And this is the basic structure. It's a course here on campus for graduate students who are interested in doing outreach in the community, with schools in particular. Okay, so we have a course, a formal course that they register for, and we train them how to do that. How do you go out into the community? How do you develop activities that are going to be engaging for the population that you're going to be working with? How do you work with teachers in schools? All that sort of stuff. And then there's sort of a practicum piece of it. So they have to go out and actually do the outreach. And the last piece is a teacher workshop that we typically would run during the summer. Okay, so those are the three pieces of it. Again, so we had this graduate course, and then we worked actually with a program called AVID. Are you all familiar with AVID? Okay, so, and this worked out pretty well. We started out, we tried a lot of different things, honestly. We tried working initially with the Boys and Girls Club. That was really not a good partnership just because it was really unstructured, and we never knew. We would show up sometimes and there would just be one student. And we had done all this work, and it was because there was another event, and it just wasn't formal enough. So then we went really formal. We went to the science classrooms. That was really not good at all either, because they had a really strict, list of things that they had to cover every single day. And if our outreach that we were doing didn't directly relate to that, well, we just didn't have any time. It was really pretty difficult to run. So we found AVID, and they have this express mission of helping students become more aware of their options, right? Of college majors, of careers, and all these sorts of things. So we fit in really perfectly to that. Every Friday they're supposed to have, guest speakers or something like that. So that's where we fit in. And we started out at the middle school level. And so we had our graduate students developing activities, hands-on activities that related to their field of expertise, and then going out into the AVID classrooms and teaching those activities. So, yep, and we, this is with the local Champaign Unit 4 school district. And so we did that for a few years, and it was good. It wasn't bad. It wasn't terrible. It wasn't great. And so we decided to change it. And this is kind of where the new name came from. And I'm going to pass it actually to Dominique to explain this part.
Oh, okay. Great. Hi, everyone. So well, the way we changed it, so when I first started working with Charlene and she brought me on board for the on-campus course, we were working with a lot of STEM students, STEM grad students, to basically give them a social justice grounding as they're working with high school students in this new partnership. And we thought it was really important to make sure we're covering really solid concepts such as power and privilege. And I used a lot of what I was already doing in educational psychology. So we have this series of classes on intergroup dialogue. So we do different topics like race and ethnicity and international U.S. relationships. I'm trying to think of, gender, resisting marginalization, so all these different topics. But we have a particular formula that we use in order to basically build this bonding within the classroom so that people are actually able to share what they're truly feeling, and then also being exposed to new materials through the readings and such. So we use this model, and we did this with the grad students, and I think it was pretty successful, right, in terms of them actually picking up some of these concepts and being able to directly apply them to, okay, what's the work that we're doing right now with high school students, and also really understanding that when they're doing outreach, it's not this this unidirectional sort of engagement where, oh, you're giving back to the community or we're just giving to high school students, but it's actually back and forth. You're actually getting as much from the high school students as you are giving. So I think having that grounding as they were doing work with the high school students was really transformational. And we did have some pushback with this new curricula, especially for instance, we invited some professors to give talks, but once again, very social justice grounded. So for instance, talk about mathematics, but how there is sometimes a power dynamic within mathematics of just assuming people who are from a marginalized background, they can't use their culturally situated knowledge in this new classroom. You have to kind of give that up in order to basically make it through, right? To make it through the academy or to make it up. But a lot of the students were very resistant to that. So what are you talking about? There's different ways to do something, 2 + 2 = 4. So they were just really resistant to some of that. But I think it was really good for us to still have these conversations because when you have resistance, that really shows that people are actually engaging with the material, right? They're not just writing you off and not saying anything at all. So we did build that sort of atmosphere in the classroom. Do you want me to talk a little bit more about some of the stuff that we did, or do you want me to say that for later?
Yeah, maybe just, the specific training and how, getting them to think critically about.
Yeah. So so in the intergroup dialogue classes that we taught, there's some guidelines that we use for each class. So for instance, perspective taking is really the big one that I try to impress upon pretty much wherever I go now, because I feel like it's such a really useful way to think about the world. So this idea of not just imagining yourself in someone else's shoes, but let's say it's a political conversation and someone's more conservative or more liberal. Why do they hold that position? But what particular factors in their life have led them to these series of decisions that inform their identity today? Right? So leading students through that perspective-taking process, especially through writing assignments as well as the readings that we're giving. So a lot of Peggy McIntosh gets taught, as well as other of the social justice, grounding sort of readings. Peggy McIntosh being Unpacking the Invisible Knapsack. So that's where you see the privilege walk come from, but like actually going to the original readings and talking about like, okay, so why did she write this the way that she did? So we do that. We also do, that first semester we did like a privilege simulation. So normally I'm not the biggest fan of simulations because they can give you a false experience, what it's actually like, for instance, to be low income or anything like that. But this one I think worked pretty well, where you have two different teams, and it's like arbitrary names, right? So like the scissor group versus the, the cup group, and they have to build origami, right? So it's, all right, okay, that seems pretty simple, but they're actually given different resources. So one group's given pictures and the other group's not given pictures. One group's given like square paper versus they have to make their own paper, this other group. So over time, you start to see like the accumulation of having a certain access to resources versus not. And that one's usually like really great because it's like a visceral sort of experience of this is what it's like to start to wonder like, oh, is the system somehow set up against me? And so usually those teams, they figure that the game is rigged pretty quickly, but then the other group, because it's still a challenging task, they don't usually notice all the issues that the other groups are having. Because like, oh, what are you talking about? Like, they still have to figure out how to make the origami because we pick designs that usually people don't know how to make. So it's, once again, showing this sort of relationship that even though you have privilege, doesn't mean that you're not working hard. It just means that you still have access to resources that maybe other people don't have access to. But you're so focused on what you're doing, you don't usually even notice that there's these differences happening. So that's like a really great way to kind of like start off the whole class and then start talking about like, okay, so what actually is privilege and how does that relate to power? And then we do other exercises too. There's another one that we usually use, dialoguing with racist Uncle Joe. So actually like thinking of tools and strategies to have those conversations with family members who maybe have said usually say racist comments. You can also change it to be sexist or any sort of like ist ideology. So those have been really successful in the past. So we do those with the grad students, and then in the meantime, they're at the same time working with the high school students while they're doing all that. So yes, anything else that you want me to bring up? Talk about the.
That was the main thing.
Okay. Any questions on that part in particular? Yes.
These programs, is there any connection or relationship with the Urbana School District 116? I saw Unit 4 and I heard Uni, Uni High. Yeah. Is there a connection or relationship with 116, the middle school, high school? And if not, are there ways that, because we're from Urbana High School, that we can connect and get programming matters like this so that some of our marginalized students can see people like yourself and this gentleman and understand that this is not just a white male or Asian student field, that there are places for them. Yeah. Legitimate roles, legitimate careers, that it's realistic. It's not something, because oftentimes I feel like a lot of our students feel that a pathway through sports entertainment is more realistic than these concrete careers that are right here in front of us. How do we bring that to Urbana? And if that's a different conversation, I can have it later, but I'm new to the district. I started in November. Okay. And I didn't hear or see any of this at our high school.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have not. Have you done work with Urbana?
No, not yet.
And I asked that because between the two districts and the two towns, Urbana's often, for lack of a better phrase, the redhead stepchild. So
it does get forgotten.
That's our story.
One thing that has helped a lot, like I mentioned, sorry.
Forgive me, sorry.
You're totally fine. I also want to say I am open to working more with Urbana district. But
so we can get cards and emails, because yes.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I think we're all very open to working with Urbana, and also we've worked in Champaign, but not at all the Champaign schools. So, for example, we've worked for the last couple years at Centennial, and then Central is getting, upset because we're not doing anything with Central either.
But just to demonstrate the difference, Urbana, as of yet, doesn't even have an admin program.
Right.
So when I say Right. What you just did, when I say trying to create even opportunities, you know, for the students in our district, the students in our building, just trying to figure out how to, you know, it's like we got a refrigerator, we're trying to bring in the groceries.
Yes.
And I think the AVID program was the mechanism by which we started to get into Centennial with Lindsay.
Correct.
So that
Yeah,
was the
with
vehicle
Lindsay.
that was used.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I mean, maybe I don't know what there might. We can discuss see what might be a vehicle that we could use to
Okay.
to do that.
Thank you.
Having
Didn't
a
mean
willing
to
teacher.
shift the whole conversation, just trying to figure out how to help my district.
Well, Charlotte, if it like just having a willing teacher at the district, that's one of the big pieces of this, right?
Willing teacher.
Yeah. I mean, having a teacher partner that's really engaged is a big deal. But that teacher has to intersect with what they're being asked to do.
Right.
And for the science teachers, it was like they were being asked to do a thing, and we were coming in, and it was cool, but it was not what they were being asked to do. Yeah.
You're welcome to come to a Chicago school and come right in the classroom.
Great.
We already have partners that do that, and it'll go right with our curriculum. So
Don't try to steal.
no, you can come to Chicago. So we'll welcome you.
Wonderful.
Yeah, right into the classrooms and the after-school club, both.
Great.
So definitely.
Yeah, so that's another mechanism. It's a good point that you mentioned after school programming. That can be another mechanism, but we do, like Dominique said, we really depend on having someone at the school who's really engaged and as committed as we are. And what we can do, and we've done this many times, we go to the superintendent and we say, look, we're writing this grant. We need you. We'll go straight to the top and say, look, we need you to provide days release time for the teacher. They need substitutes. They need a school bus to come to campus for field trip. They need X, Y, and Z, and we will, yeah. Yeah, so we can ask directly to the administration for those things, and we've been successful in that, but we need a teacher who says, or it could be, a counselor, it could be, just someone at the school who says, okay, I'm gonna make sure that if you do all this work, that when you come out to the school, there's going to be a classroom full of students ready to learn. And that, when it comes time to organize a field trip or something like that, that all the forms are signed and all that sort of stuff, and the kids show up. Because we have to do a lot of work here on campus to where, we're ordering 100 lunches and we're organizing tours of this and that. So we've had experiences where on the school side, and it's not necessarily because it's a person who's unprofessional. It really oftentimes is just because they are so busy. They are just packed. They are just trying to get through the day. And this is extra. This is not part of what they're being asked to do. So that's absolutely true. So I think, and then just another piece, I will say that families and parents and community are a huge piece too. So for example, the reason that Champaign has AVID is because the parents got together and actually sued the school district for racial discrimination. That's why they have AVID. That was a response to the consent decree. They actually purchased AVID. That was their response, right? To say, okay, yes, it was demonstrated that absolutely that they were, that especially African-American children, African-American boys were being taken out of the classroom and were missing tons and tons of class time for disciplinary issues, right? And so they basically, the parents sued and they won. And that's why Champaign has AVID. It's an expensive program. And the district pays for it because the taxpayers said, you need to do this. And so I think that having that, having the parents and the families, connect with the educators who are wanting to see this change, and then us at the university, I think that's a really powerful, that can be a really powerful partnership for change to really actually happen. So I talked about, well, I guess I didn't. Let me talk really quickly about what we did the first year in the, at the high school level, and then I'm gonna pass it over to Professor Bradley to talk about what they did the second year, what he led the second year. So this is an example of one of the teams. So what we did, this is a couple of years ago now, again, we were trying to find a mechanism for outreach that was more like what Dominique said of equal partnership, not sort of we're going out to sort of tell you something you don't know, but really coming together to create something and leveraging all the, you leverage your knowledge, I leverage my knowledge, and we all come together as equals. And so what we did is we wanted to choose something that was going to be, even for the graduate students who are experts in mechanical engineering or something like that. Well, they don't necessarily know about wheelchair basketball, which is what we chose. We chose wheelchair basketball, and we happen to have an excellent wheelchair basketball program here at the University of Illinois. And so what we did is we all went to a game. And we took it was our first field trip. We brought all the kids to campus, and we had a talk by the coach, and then we watched a game, and they were so shocked because I don't know if you've ever seen wheelchair basketball, but it is like, it's violent. I mean, it's really like frightening because they slam into each other and they fall over and they have to and part of the point is to slam into someone because then, they fall over and then they go out of the game, and it's really intense. So I think they thought it would be, like, I don't know what sort of ideas they had, but they were blown away. The students were blown away, the graduate students and the high school students. And so what they did is they watched a game, then afterward they interviewed the players. And they had to use this concept of user-oriented design, which is something that's being used a lot now in lots of different fields in engineering, where you consider the user as an expert, right? So if you are in a wheelchair, you are the expert on what people in wheelchairs need. You're the expert. So I might know a lot about how to build a, a motorized part that you might add to your wheelchair or something, but I don't have the idea for how, like, what would actually be useful and how that would actually be used, right? So they had some training, the graduate students had some training beforehand, and then worked with their high school students to use this concept of empathic design, user-oriented design. They interviewed the wheelchair basketball players, and together they came up with an idea for what kind of technology they could work on developing that would be of use to them. And we initially thought it was only for the game, but then it kind of went bigger than the game. So, like, for example, they decided to look at comfort and mobility. But actually, I guess it is still for athletes. So this group actually still did focus on comfort and mobility for the game. And so they developed a prototype smart wheelchair that detected running into obstacles, and then it would automatically change direction. And then they also thought about the seat and how to make the seat more comfortable. And then they did all this. They had to learn, how to program an Arduino. And that's what you see, the little prototype over there. They learned to work with a variety of different sensors, and they, looked at materials and different types of foam materials that they tested out. So there are lots of different examples of what students did. So again, this is one of our grad students on the right, and the students on the bottom and at the left. And so this is a quote directly from Jamie, who's a grad student. And they wanted their project to focus on player safety. Yeah, a lot of people actually, after seeing them slam into each other, they were like, they wanted to make the game more safe. They were really worried about these players. So they decided to design and prototype a self-correcting wheelchair that would help stabilize the athletes if they're off balance, so they'd be less likely to fall. So there are just lots of different things that the students did. This one was thinking about the bus that they had to ride. And that it's hard to, fit the wheelchairs basically onto the bus. This team was pretty great, actually. The mentor, the graduate student, the high school kids said, I want to feel what it's like to. They started thinking, when they talked to the wheelchair athletes, they started thinking about accessibility, because they were talking about, just how beyond the game, just how hard it is for them to get from place to place, and they never know when they're gonna encounter a situation where it's just not accessible for them. And so they started thinking about their school. but is my school accessible? And how would you get in? And where, you know what? And they started to notice all these things in their school. So the mentor went to some like thrift store, right? I can't remember where he went, and he bought a wheelchair, and he brought it to the school, and then the kids used it. And so they went in a wheelchair every day for, I can't remember, like a week or something like that. You know, they had worked on a seatbelt design, but that team was really impressive because they really just wanted to feel personally what it was like in their own school. And this is another team. I can't remember what they did, but they took amazing notes. I remember that at the wheelchair basketball chairs are not, you know, they're built for the game. They're not necessarily built for comfort, but they end up having to wait between games, and they wait a long time. It's really uncomfortable. So they thought about that. So students did a lot of coding types of things. A couple of teams thought about publicity. So they were making, because one of the other issues was that there weren't a lot of people at the games. So they thought, well, why aren't there any spectators? Why don't people know? Like, they loved it. The high school students were like, why didn't I know about this sport before? This is so slightly scary, but very entertaining. And so they just didn't understand why more people didn't know about it. So they built these video games and apps to kind of create more awareness about it. This team was really cool. They talked to the coach who said people with certain types of injuries don't know when they're overheating, and so what'll happen is they'll get too hot to the point where they have to be taken out of the game for the rest of the game. Whereas if they could just have more, because they just don't have the awareness in the lower part of their body. So if they had some signal to tell them like, ooh, I'm sort of reaching that point, then they could take themselves out of the game or just slow down, and then they wouldn't have to, you know, be out for the rest of the game, basically. And so they played around with thermochromic paints, so these paints that, you know, change color based on the temperature, right? And they made leggings that a player could wear that would change color to let them know that maybe they need to get out of the game. And they painted their fingernails with it and everything. So, so there were lots of different things that the students did. This is another one, anti-tipping. So they looked at that issue and built an anti-tipping device. So there are lots of different things. This is another app to raise awareness, and this is another video game that the students created. So that's what they did, you know, the first year. They really did this as a team. Like, the students knew just as much as the graduate students. So the graduate students knew more about how to prototype and build the thing, but the students really had a lot of great ideas about, well, you know, like, how could we raise awareness about this sport and get more people to the game? It was really an equal partnership. Yes.
Was that the theme for the year?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we actually got the theme. When we were looking for a theme, we talked to the teacher. And we said, you know, we're looking for a theme. We want to find a community partner. We want to, you know, and she told me, she was an avid teacher, but also an English teacher. And she said, well, they're all ninth graders. And we're doing in ninth grade, we do a whole unit on, it's like, do you remember, Dominique? It's like disability and, yeah, like awareness of people with disabilities, and looking at it from lots of different perspectives. And they were reading and writing essays and all this sort of stuff. So she said, well, maybe you could do something about that. And that's where we got the idea. So yeah, we had that teacher who, you know, worked very closely with us. So it helped us to find a good topic. Yeah. Well, so this was about 40 students, 20 students each, AVID class. There were 2 AVID classes, and it's just the way that it worked out that at Centennial they had 2 AVID classes per grade, more or less. And so we wanted to work with all the students of one grade. What we'd ideally love to do is like all 3 high schools do all 9th graders. Something where, you know, every student could go through the program. That would be really great. But we just haven't been able to do that. So the second year, so now we've added a second year to the program. This is making it more complicated because now it's a 2-year program, and Professor Bradley is going to tell you what the second year looks like.
Hi, everyone. I truly love working with IRise a whole lot, and you actually do see the impact. Just talking to Lindsay, offline, type of things that the students really gain from a lot of the stuff that we do. So I'm with whatever you guys want to do. I definitely want to work with whatever school is interested in doing this with the students. And so, so the students, they go through the first year and they learn that you can use technology to solve problems. And so in the next year, we try to introduce them to how to take that out into the community and basically look at it from a business perspective. So using technology to solve a problem, and I think about business as a way to make money by solving other people's problems. And we all engage, we buy solutions for things we need. And so we try to expose students to some level of business concepts, so where they take those projects that they worked on in their previous semester. So basically 2 semesters, we do it in the spring during the semesters. So during the second year, they form actual companies, and so they take on the roles and responsibilities of someone that will be in that position, either as like a CEO or marketing exec. And so we teach them the skills they would need to operate in there, from doing market research, learn a lot about who might be individuals that might want to buy or purchase their products, how they would get those products manufactured, how they would do advertising, how they would take those solutions and into the marketplace. And so some of them had some really good ideas. And one of the cool things, they get to also talk about this and present this at the university at NCSA. And so they get to go on stage and let everyone hear about their work. And there's normally the News Gazette is there and some other type of media outlets. So they really get opportunity to really showcase what they've learned over the process. And so how we started previous spring is I talked about what I can learn from business from a toothbrush. And so I want to find a common thing that everyone will be aware of. And if you actually go to the toothbrush aisle at the store, you see all kinds. You see the travel toothbrush, see toothbrushes of different lengths, toothbrushes with different types of bristles. And so it was just a way to say, for different markets, for different segments, different users, you have different user groups that's going to buy different toothbrushes. And so I want to first engage them on just looking at a product and understanding that you designed for particular users, and then you use technology. They'll use their STEM background, the information, and just to see them like light up and to say, wow, how technology is cool and I can do it. So I can really see them saying, hey, I can program Arduino, I can do like 3D printing, I can do CAD, I can do all these things that we just really see them, and it'll actually solve a problem. And then I can build a company where someone would pay me to solve their problem. And so it's really trying to make the intersection of those elements and get them really started thinking about the benefit of technology, how they could play an intricate role in the development of technology. That's not a user of technology, but actually a developer, creator, provider of technology, and then just bringing it all together under this kind of scheme of looking at it from entrepreneurial perspective. And so so I think we have some good work in that space that we can share if you guys are interested, or even come out and join in to provide these types of things to the class. Cool. Yes.
Does the school have to pay a fee?
Not that I know of. I don't know of any additional fee.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, the school commitment tends to be like, the school buses to do the field trips is a cost to them.
Yeah.
The substitutes, anytime you have a teacher come on a field trip, they've got to pay for a substitute. The teacher does need some release time.
Right.
And that's varied from year to year. Sometimes they get, just a couple of days. Sometimes they get more. But that's the kind of thing that we usually ask the school district for.
Okay.
In terms of supplies and materials, it's not, for us, we can typically cover that with our grants. But the teacher time is the most important.
And that's the teacher with the students at the particular field trips? So as a teacher, was that side something else?
Yeah, it's usually we like to be able to partner with the teacher who's in the classroom with the students.
Right.
Because they know the students.
Right.
And then when we're not there, like Lindsay, she worked with the students and had them, she did so many things with them.
Okay.
Right? While we weren't there, like at one point, she had them write letters, do you remember that? To the grad students?
Yes.
She had them write letters to the grad students, and it was such, I mean, because you have to imagine that for us, we're running a course on campus. In a certain way, our primary audience is actually the students here at the university.
Right.
So we want them to be transformed by this experience.
Right.
We want them to learn. And so the things that this teacher was doing was like,
Right.
you know, she had them write specific letters telling the grad students, like, here's what you taught me,
Right.
and here's what I want, you know, just like, it was really powerful for the grad students to read these things and just be like, wow.
Can I add a couple of things?
Uh-huh.
So I think to your question that all of this is resource-based. So we have so many grad students who can go out to the classroom, and we'd love to build that pool and make that pool bigger and work with undergraduate students. And getting students up to Chicago is a different kind of expense than getting students to a school here. But all of those sorts of supports are things that we would like to think about how we can make that happen.
Okay.
This sort of project is a really good fit for like thinking about that capstone project that Professor Goddard was talking about, right? So you all are developing your STEM clubs, whether that STEM activity and that work is going to happen in a classroom or in an after-school program. You're going to have a consistent group of students
Right.
that can be depended on, which is what we're hearing our IRise friends say is really beneficial, is having that consistent group who can follow through on the project all the way through the year. And this is how you can take a project that's really, really meaningful to the community, to the students, to everybody who's involved, and really thinking about impacting the community. And so that social, keeping that social awareness in the work that you do. So that's sort of one of the connections. I don't know if you all were aware that this group, they are developing STEM clubs, and that's part of their work that they're doing here. And so they're representing 5 different schools, and they're working on developing a year-round action plan. And so your action plan for how you go about doing that could tie in some of these ideas. Getting families involved is something, you're going to have this pool of students that you're going to be really close with. And if you build those relationships then with the families who can advocate for an AVID program, all of these things can sort of become a domino effect, right? So you all are sort of a catalyst, catalyzing this work with your STEM clubs, and they're just all sorts of possibilities for how that work can continue to build and grow and flow.
Yeah, and I think one other thing Joe mentioned was the symposium that we do. We always do a symposium on campus, and it's a very professional symposium. It's like a engineering or scientific real poster. They have to create a poster. They have their prototype.
Like what you saw last week. Yeah, like what you all saw last week at the Young Scholars, the high school research posters. Except they actually present, right? They get up on stage for the symposium.
Yeah, they do a presentation, and we invite the deans, different department heads. So they get to really get that feel, and they get asked questions, technical questions, business questions, and so they understand it, so they prepping themselves to actually do a trial run on what types of questions you might get leading up to the presentation. So they really get a feel of what it's like to present their work and to be able to explain it. That was a really important learning object.
Yeah, I'm looking at the title, using technology to solve problems in the community, the entrepreneurship component, so that should they learn these skills, maybe they want to expand into this area, and the social justice. And I guess the question that I had is what is the objective in teaching them to recognize privilege? So what's the objective there?
And I think that was more toward the graduate students.
Yeah,
When-
it was a grad, so that was the on-campus class for grad students.
Okay.
So I had to get that there. Yeah.
Their particular project, though, there was also some perspective taking, right? And the students who are not in wheelchairs are discovering some privilege that they have as well.
Yeah, and so I thought those actually went really well together.
Yeah.
And some of the feedback we got, because we tried to definitely work in tandem with the wheelchair basketball team and the coach. But so some of the projects were very, they end up being kind of focused on the safety of the players. And while that was appreciated, there was also some feedback, like for instance, that was some of the things that the wheelchair basketball players really loved, though, is like how, like gritty and like,
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
They like it. Like
yeah,
I
they
was
actually
talking.
really. So that sort of perspective taking, so, and you see that in various levels, but that really helped inform the other projects. And sorry if you already mentioned this, but in that next year we're doing entrepreneurship, and we're working on that. The project from the previous year, we took all that feedback into account. So perspective taking showed up in the complaints throughout the collaboration.
And then it relates to money at the end of the day.
Right.
From a business, it's an extra motivation to say, why should you care about this other person's perspective, how they feel, what they think? But, right, isn't that part of the thing?
And understanding their role that they can play. My big thing is understanding that you, making sure they understand that you can play a role in the development of technology. You can be a creator, not just a user.
Right.
And so you can understand it from a mechanism as a creator. There's also this business part where you can actually build a Google. You don't have to just use a search engine. So that's one of the things, and you see a lot, they are extremely creative when they're working on these projects because they just feel it open. They're solving problems they actually care about. And I think one thing we explored was food scarcity was one we want to take into, because some students had raised that issue. So it's like, okay, what can we think about? What solutions can we use to solve food scarcity problems? We're going to think it from a technical perspective and also blend in a social element and then understand it from a business perspective. So we're trying to blend those three kind of components together in terms of what we're trying to leave them with. Thank you.
Thank you.